Hello, I'm Tricia Springer, and I'm going to be your host on this Rand McNally video trip to the land down under, Australia. We'll show you what this vast continent has to offer to a visitor, and you'll find out everything you need to know to have the vacation here that's right for you. Now, I'm standing in front of the Sydney Opera House. It's surely the most recognizable landmark on the entire continent. While we're here, we'll meet some of the friendliest people in the whole world. And then I'll tell you how to get here, how to get around, what there is to see and do, what sort of weather to expect, and a lot more. But this is a big country, and we have a long way to go. So let's get started. First off, where is it? Easy. Head 6 time zones west of Los Angeles and take a left. You can't miss it. Australia is an island that's almost the size of the continental United States, but with a population of only 16 million. Western Australia is the largest of the 6 states and 2 territories, followed by Queensland, the Northern Territory, South Australia, New South Wales, Victoria, the island state of Tasmania, and the tiny Australian Capital Territory, where Canberra, the country's capital, is located. On our tour, the logical starting point is, naturally enough, Sydney, the first settlement in the country, and the city with the largest population, something over 3 million. With an area sprawling over 670 square miles, the capital of New South Wales dwarfs even Los Angeles. It was in Sydney that Captain Arthur Phillip landed in 1788 with his load of convicts from England. No doubt he had no idea what he'd started and couldn't have imagined the big bang of its bicentennial in 1988, not in his wildest dreams. Come to think of it, he might well have turned back around to England if he'd seen the traffic snarls. Sydney's narrow city streets slow driving to a koala's pace, so make sure to allow extra time to navigate its byways. Chances are, if there's one structure in the country you've seen before, it's the Sydney Opera House. It juts out on Bennelong Point in the deep blue harbor like some massive, gorgeous seagull come into land. There's not a piece of architecture like it in the world, and there was a very close chance that there wouldn't have been a Sydney Opera House either. Not like this, anyway. It took 16 years to build and went 14 times over budget. Today, the Opera House is right up there with the kangaroo, the koala, and Paul Hogan as a national symbol. You can take it all in and rest up in one of the restaurants with majestic views of the harbor. While you're at it, see if you can come up with any better nicknames for the Opera House than the dry wits of Sydney-siders have dreamed up. Operasaurus, the New South Whale, and the Hunchback of Bennelong Point have already been spoken for. As clunky as the Opera House is graceful, the Sydney Harbour Bridge is referred to in jest as the old coat hanger and is equally recognizable as a symbol for the city. Built in 1932, this arcing mass of gray steel comes in just a few feet shy of the Golden Gate, but the resemblance stops there. Every day, commuters crisscross this span by every mode of conveyance: bus, car, train, bicycle, and on foot. First stop after the bridge touches down is the Rocks. To see what Sydney was like more than 100 years ago, a tour of the area known as the Rocks is a must. This is where whole shiploads of convicts from the First Fleet were set down, put to work, and they started carving out a foothold for what was soon to become one of the most attractive cities in the whole world. The Rocks was Sydney's early commercial and maritime quarter, filled with warehouses, bawdy taverns, flop houses, and lusty seafarers from around the world. Back in those days, if you were looking for trouble in Sydney, this was the place to be. The rowdiness continued into the early 1900s when there was an epidemic of the bubonic plague. It was during this time that many of the original buildings were destroyed in an attempt at rat control. Well, luckily, some of the original areas remain, and today some of the best shopping in Sydney can be found right here. Before diving feet first into the Rocks, take a few minutes to look in on the Information Center. A short film traces the history of the area from convict days right on up to the present crusade to restore the dusky sandstone buildings to their original state. Armed with their map, make your way first to the Argyle Arts Center. The convicts who sweated over this warehouse back in 1820 wouldn't recognize the craft center it has become. Glass blowers, potters, experts in beeswax candle making and brass rubbings bend to their work. The highly talented convict architect Francis Howard Greenway designed St. James Church and prisoner housing in the Hyde Park Barracks further down the street. The Australian Museum contains one of the most extensive collections of Aboriginal art in the world. Across the street in Hyde Park, originally Sydney's town common, are a pair of the city's better-known statues, the mythic figures of the Archibald Fountain and the massive red granite and marble Anzac War Memorial. Sprawling over an entire city block, the Victorian curiosity of the Queen Victoria Building was once the municipal library. Now it's a maze of shops. This overgrown mall is as good a place as any to fan out along downtown's principal shopping thoroughfares, along George, Pitt, Castlereagh, and Elizabeth Streets. Martin Place marks the center of Sydney's corporate world. Here, the office-bound stream out on sunny days, that is, most days, liberate their ties and shoes and sit back and listen to outdoor jam sessions over their yogurts and pasta salads. Over the hill from downtown, King's Cross has cleaned up its act considerably since it was labeled Sydney's Times Square. You still don't have to go too far out of your way to stumble over the strip clubs, tattoo and massage parlors, and transvestite havens. But the old seediness is giving way to chic French bistros and Lebanese takeouts. As always, this is Disco Central, and whatever the style of the moment, count on King's Cross to exploit it to the fullest possible extent, and then some. Another neighborhood, Paddington, had grown a bit tattered around the edges. That is, until a few years ago, when journalists, artists, attorneys, and other professional types moved in to restore the row houses to their original glory. These days, Paddington sports the look of a spruced-up New Orleans, with its 2- and 3-story houses splashed in a rainbow of pastels, and the intricately wrought cast-iron balconies painted in contrasting colors. Further out along the harbor, Double Bay is Sydney's answer to Rodeo Drive. Double Pay, as Sydney wits have dubbed it, even has the hills of Beverly Hills, but here the lavish houses look out over the sky blue bay. If you continue out on Wentworth Road, the Harbor Road, in no time you'll wind up with your just reward. That would be Doyle's on Watson's Bay, the most famous seafood restaurant in the country, the spot where every out-of-town visitor is taken if he or she is lucky enough. Dig into the local barramundi or King George Sound whiting while you gaze over the sailboats riding at anchor, and you begin to savor the self-satisfaction Sydneysiders take as their birthright. Back downtown at Circular Quay is where it all began. Somehow it's fitting that the city and the country itself started off on the spot where the harbor ferries ply back and forth, fanning across this waterborne port. The harbor seems to stretch forever, but actually it's a mere 148 miles of shoreline. Harbor cruises take in the highlights, or you might climb aboard one of the commuter ferries with all the office workers and see what it's like to have the beauteous whole of Sydney's bay and skyline wake you up every morning. One of the quickest introductions to the harbor is the ferry hop from Circular Quay over to Taronga Zoo. The name even translates as lovely sea views in the Aboriginal tongue. And the setting for the zoo, looking back over to downtown Sydney, the Opera House, bridge and all, has to be one of the most dramatic anywhere in the world. Ask the giraffes. This is Cindy the wombat. She's one of the many native Australian animals found here at the Taronga Zoo. Cindy's a baby wombat. She's about 12 months old and will actually grow to be about 3 times this size. She was raised by hand by the people here at the zoo because her mother was run over by a car. And that's also why she's so friendly and pretty comfortable in front of the camera. A wild one wouldn't be quite this way. Cindy looks a little groggy because I think we woke her up from a nap. Normally she's nocturnal. And she's a marsupial, related to both the koala bear and the kangaroo, strange as that may seem, and I think I'd just like to take her home with me. Apart from Cindy the wombat, some of the more unusual beasts you'll come across here include the ostrich-like emu, red kangaroos 6 feet tall, and koalas sleeping off their meals of eucalyptus berries. The berries make them drunk. try to watch them move. Keep watching. Still awake? If they move at all, it's in the slowest motion you can imagine. Look at them snoozing away in the crook of the trees without falling. How do they do that? Life in Sydney revolves around its beaches. There are 34 within the city limits alone, and maybe hundreds stretching up and down the ocean coast. The closest in is Bondi. But it was on Manly Beach where surfing actually began, believe it or not, in 1902. It seems an intrepid journalist named William Gosher jumped into the surf in defiance of a local ordinance, pronounced the waves bitchin', and the craze was on. Manly, by the way, was named by Captain Phillip to honor the Aborigines he found living there before him, a group he found to be, well, manly. These days, the captain might zip over on one of the hydrofoils that leave Circular Quay every half hour and deposit their swimsuit-clad passengers to fan out through the gift shops and eateries of the Corso pedestrian shopping mall. Surfing, of course, was only one of the sports to put sports-mad Australia on the map of world athletics. In sailing, tennis, and cricket, Sydney has a reputation for producing champions. Every weekend, emerald greenswards all over town are dotted with ladies and gentlemen in whites, pacing back and forth in the genteel diversion of lawn bowling. This sport bears as much resemblance to indoor bowling as it does to rugby, another amateur passion hereabouts. It's a little-known fact that frisbee started down here, Aboriginal frisbee that is, better known as boomerang throwing. Now, not every Aussie is born with one of these curved sticks in his hand, but Paul Bryden, the national boomerang champion, makes it look as if he were. When you think of Australia, you think about boomerangs, and we're very fortunate to have with us Mr. Paul Bryden. He's Australia's champion boomerang thrower, and he's going to tell us a little bit about the world's oldest sport and give us a demonstration.
Aboriginal people developed this sport thousands of years ago for their own enjoyment and their own fun. What we've done nowadays is developed a whole new range of aerodynamic boomerangs, and this is the type we use in the modern sporting competitions. And I want to teach you how to throw and have some fun with you.
Okay.
Take the boomerang at this particular end and get a firm grip, just with a couple of fingers. Tilt it slightly to the right. Take it back over your shoulder and then throw forward, and as you do, snap your wrist and release it with as much spin as you can, because spin will make it a successful flight. And don't throw too high or too low, just straight out at your eye level, and then it should come back to you very nicely. The boomerang flies and returns because of several things. The aerodynamic qualities of the outline shape, the angle at the elbow of the boomerang, and the way the surfaces are beveled all contribute and combine in making it go out, lay over, and spin right back into the thrower.
Keep trying. Either you'll get the hang of it or it will get the hang of you. If you go to a horse race, prepare for a shock. No, you don't need glasses. The horses are actually running backwards. Well, not backwards exactly, but clockwise, the opposite direction ours run. Sydney-siders are as avid for horse racing as they are for that form of unarmed combat known as Australian rules football, footy. When it comes to sports, the normally friendly rivalry turns serious. I'd have to go with Melbourne, the otherwise very proper capital of the state of Victoria. Melbourne is the second largest city in Australia, and it has quite a different personality from its northern rival, Sydney. The British influence runs deep here, and you can't help but feel a little of the English influence when you walk down the beautiful tree-lined streets. Melburnians are quick to point out that, unlike Sydney, this city was not founded by convicts, but by free Englishmen from Tasmania, and they say that's made all the difference. In return for blankets, axes, mirrors, and some accounts say apple apples, the Aborigines signed over 600,000 acres to real estate speculator John Batman in 1835. The discovery of gold in nearby Ballarat in 1851 brought out fortune seekers in droves, diggers they were called. And by the 1880s, Melbourne was a boomtown, made graceful by the Victorian buildings, lavish parks, and open street layout you see today. Second Melbourne may be in population, but it lays claim to being the country's capital of finance, fashion, and the arts, theater especially. The city also derives great cultural diversity and flavor from its immigrants, making it Australia's ethnic melting pot. Melbourne is an easy city to get around, particularly if you hail one of the pedicabs shuttling about. Downtown has been laid out on a grid pattern of streets, and more than a quarter of the land area has been given over to parks and open space. Most of the city's 3 million inhabitants live in suburbs, swelling all the way out to the Dandenong Ranges. The Golden Mile, as downtown is known, centers around Collins and Bourke Street, part of which has been turned into a pedestrian mall. Here the sight of glass and steel skyscrapers is relieved by the juxtaposition of Victorian, Edwardian, and Art Deco masterpieces, many constructed in native blue stone. Nearby stands the Stock Exchange, built in 1883 during the height of the boom. The ghost of Ned Kelly, the infamous bushranger or bank robber, haunts the old Melbourne jail. It was here that the 25-year-old Kelly was hanged, uttering those famous last words, "Such is life." Well, poetry was not Kelly's strong suit. Inside the museum is the bullet-ridden armor he wore on the day he was captured. If anyone tells you to meet them under the clocks, there's only one place they could be talking about. The rows of clocks lined up in the massively clunky Flinders Street rail station is one of the most well-known rendezvous points in the country, located as it is across the street from another landmark, Young and Jackson's Pub. Inside the pub is Chloe, the portrait of a standing nude that shocked Melbourne society back in 1880. The rail station was named after Captain Matthew Flinders, the first European explorer to circumnavigate the continent and to call the huge island mass Australia. Electric trains scatter from here to all points on the suburban compass, but it is the city trams that flaunt their high profile, clicking along 137 miles of track in grand style. Hop on to number 15 for one of the best sightseeing bargains around. The route runs past elegant 19th century terrace houses and the cafes of Little Italy. The 15 then rumbles into the heart of Chinatown on Little Bourke Street, one of the largest and most vibrant anywhere. The undisputed granddaddy of outdoor markets is the Victoria Market. Weekdays, the stalls are strung end to end with every sort of fruit or vegetable the country has to offer. Like an abstract battleship pulled up along the Yarra River, the Victorian Arts Centre is as much a Melbourne landmark as the Opera House is in Sydney. Since it's bigger than New York's Lincoln Center and sports a replica of the Eiffel Tower on top, it would be hard to miss. Inside are theaters, an opera house, restaurants, a stunning concert hall with state-of-the-art acoustics, and the National Gallery. Waterfalls, fountains, and sun-drenched courtyards create a serene setting for a well-rounded collection that includes Rembrandts, as well as an abundance of pieces from Asia and Australia. With 1,700 acres of parks and gardens, the city has handily banished any threat of urban claustrophobia. The Royal Botanic Gardens in the King's Domain Park enjoy a reputation as some of the most imaginatively landscaped in the world. Among the mere 12,000-odd species of plants, give or take a few, you'll also come across masses of ducks and black swans gliding by on several shaded ponds. That's billabongs to you, mate. Queen Victoria Garden nearby is notable for its giant floral clock. Make that talking clock, since it spiels out background information on the gardens. The great domed monument within Domain Park is the Shrine of Remembrance. At the 11th hour of the 11th month, a single shaft of sunlight strikes the stone of remembrance within, commemorating the armistice of World War I. Inside Fitzroy Gardens, Captain Cook's cottage looks a tad out of place, as well it might. The explorer's home was shipped over from Yorkshire and reconstructed timber by timber. London residents sent over a miniature Tudor village as grateful thanks for the state's generosity after World War II. And a whimsically carved fairy tree was the work of one Ola Cohen in the 1930s, her way of making the children of Melbourne smile. Nearby the sunken garden is the backdrop of choice for photographing Melbourne newlyweds. Carlton Gardens, at the start of Little Italy, within whiffing distance of the espresso bars of the University Quarter, surrounds the 19th century exhibition building, a grandiose neoclassical pile. Further out lies the Melbourne Zoo, one of the oldest in captivity, built in 1857. Fortunately, many of the enclosures have been opened up so that you walk through the animals' environment and not the other way around. Melbourne has come a long way indeed since American GIs on furlough used to grouse that the city was half as big as New York's largest cemetery and twice as dead. These days, the city has its own symphony orchestra, opera and ballet companies, and theater of every stripe. Anyone mad enough to brave the 100,000-plus crowds jammed into the Melbourne cricket ground for the grand final of Australian rules football will see firsthand just how unrestrained the natives can be. Footy, which borrows the roughest aspects of rugby, Gaelic football, and soccer, was invented here, and it shows. As long as we're on sports, we might as well tackle that favorite Aussie pastime called confusing the Yanks. It's also known as the Australian language. And here are a few tips on how to play.
Now that you've been here about a fortnight, you probably understand the old saying that America and Australia are separated by a common language. So let's take a Captain Cook or a look at some of the differences. So let's take a look at the car. Where we have a bonnet, you have a hood, and our boot is your trunk. And when you're driving down under, you're driving, and don't forget, on the opposite side of the road, because you're sitting on the opposite side of the car, and your steering wheel is on the opposite side, and you're looking out the windscreen. I'd like to ask you over for tea tonight, which means that you're coming over for the evening meal. If we ask you over in the afternoon, we have afternoon tea. But if we're feeling really good and go out to a restaurant and sit down and ask for an entree firstly, we're really looking at an appetiser. And tomorrow morning, we're having a really nice brekkie with all of the family, which means we're having breakfast together. Toward the end of the year, we'd like to invite you over for Chrissy, which means you're coming to our place at Christmas time, which is most likely when we have our long holidays, something like your vacation. And it's so hot down under that we'd be wearing our cozies around the place, which means we'd probably be even having lunch in our bathing suits. It's a bottler of an autumn day. It's just about midday. A beautiful Sheila just walked past, and I'm being fair dinkum about Aussie English. If you'd like to try a little bit more language down under, come and visit us. Yeah, she'll be right, mate, no worries.
While there's more than enough to keep you occupied in Melbourne proper, two of the more popular excursions are down south to Brighton Beach and further inland to the Dandenong Ranges. As you move west out of Victoria, the air becomes drier and you'll know you're in the state of South Australia. Adelaide, the capital, lies up the rocky coastline of the Great Australian Bight. The 1 million or so residents of Adelaide enjoy a beautifully planned and well laid out city surrounded entirely by a lovely park system. It's also known as the City of Churches. But what really put Adelaide on the map, so to speak, was when it became the last stop in the International Formula One Grand Prix racing circuit. This is an event that attracts lots of attention and thousands of visitors every year. If you plan on seeing the Grand Prix in November, reserve your room months in advance. Otherwise, the only race you'll find is the one for hotel accommodations. The sensible residents of Adelaide are perfectly content to leave the racing to the Formula Ones. The pace of life here is far slower than in Sydney or Melbourne. If you manage to avoid all or most all modern urban ills and still be reputed as one of the most pleasant, enlightened cities in the country, why not? The ubiquitous Mark Twain was so charmed with Adelaide, he waxed on that if the rest of Australia or any small part were half so beautiful, it was a fortunate country. There's no telling what heights of praise he might have hit had the author made it out to Barossa Valley to sample the wines. The city has a British Army engineer, Colonel William Light, to thank for a master plan that was extremely forward-thinking for 1836 when Adelaide was founded. It allowed for spacious streets, garden squares that make it nearly impossible to get lost, and a ring of parkland that envelops the city center. King William Street, the widest in the country, links the commercial downtown to North Adelaide and its prosperous mansions across the Torrens River. Having shed its reputation as Wowzerville, that is, stuffed shirtland, Adelaide is swinging in the opposite direction. Now it's Festival City. Every other year, on even-numbered years, the Adelaide Festival of the Arts draws world-class performers to what has become the most prestigious cultural event in the country. By day, you might gain a better appreciation of how green the city is by cruising upriver on one of the Popeye fleet's sturdy craft. Boats move Adelaide style, taking their sweet time, that is, on the meandering Torrens between the festival center and the zoo. Rundle Mall downtown is about as hectic as Adelaide becomes. This outdoor arcade hums with browsers out in force among the department stores, cafes, and flower stands, pausing now and then to appraise the mimes and musicians who've set up shop on the cobblestone streets. A few blocks away sits Town Hall, a sort of free-form Renaissance construction, complete with the visages of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, glowering over all below. The South Australian Museum only looks like a lost part of Canterbury Cathedral. Inside, it's thoroughly down under, with the largest assemblage of Aboriginal artifacts in the world, Melanesian totems, and the very fearsome skeleton of a giant diprotodon, ancestor to the wombat. Lucky thing these dinosaur types aren't stalking about in the Botanic Garden, scaring the swans and running amok among the gum trees, or bothering guests at the Royal Botanic Hotel across the street. If you take the tram to Glenelg, you'll find an amusement park and fish and chip stands have sprung up near the spot where Governor Hindmarsh landed in 1836. Down the broad strand a bit, a replica of his ship, the HMS Buffalo, is a floating restaurant where your crab comes on pewter plates and your locally produced sparkling wine in pewter tankards. Even the good governor might get a kick out of Marineland's performing dolphins and seals up at West Beach. Nightlife in Adelaide means Hindley Street, downtown. You might start with dinner in a Vietnamese, Indian, or Italian spot, then move along to one of the jazz or rock clubs, and emerge again for a Greek pastry. Dive back in and keep the cycle up as long as your energy holds out. Day-long excursions into the Adelaide Hills take you into country towns like Gummaracha for its toy factory and Birdwood Mill. This 1846 flour mill turned museum in the Mount Lofty Ranges mixes pioneer art with vintage cars, most of them still, amazingly, in running condition. But the real draw is the taste of frontier life and the wintertime panorama down the Green Valley to Adelaide. The capital of Western Australia is a long way from nowhere. Adelaide, the nearest metropolis, is 1,750 miles to the east. Such isolation has only served to make Perth more self-sufficient. The city of Perth got a lot of worldwide attention when it hosted the America's Cup, but Australians have always known it for its glamorous, opulent, somewhat flashy lifestyle, because you see, Perth has more than its share of millionaires, and it shows in the way they live. For example, one local tycoon has been known several times to fly the entire Danish Symphony Orchestra to his property in a desolate part of the outback just to hear an impromptu concert. He must have been in the mood for classical music. But wealthy or not, Perth is a very friendly city, just as friendly as the rest of Australia. Who wouldn't be open and expansive in such a city? Just look at it. San Francisco comes to mind, only with more sun. The Swan River swells as wide as a bay around downtown, and from just about anywhere in the city, you have a view of water. The mansions of Dalkeith and more modest neighborhoods both hug the banks of the river on its passage the 12 miles to Fremantle, where it empties into the Indian Ocean. The cup races were held here, and if you watched any of them on television, you might have been impressed by the pristine beaches that stretch seemingly forever. The Auld Mug, ensconced in the Royal Perth Yacht Club for a triumphant 3 years, is gone now. But the memory of the mayhem of Cup victory past, and more important, the excuse to have one giant, extended, never-ending party, a real Bobby Dazzler, lingers on and on. Maybe next year, mates. Perth began on a race, fittingly enough for the upstart that snatched the America's Cup away. In 1827, Captain James Stirling was dispatched by the British to cut off an attempt by French explorers to claim the West. This remote outpost poked along until gold fever struck in 1885. Almost overnight, Perth was transformed into a boom town, and by 1915, a transcontinental railroad linked it to the east. Modern as the skyline is, and seemingly under constant construction, downtown has managed to preserve some of its Victorian-era character. High-rise office towers dominate St. George's Terrace, the city's principal commercial thoroughfare overlooking the Riverside Esplanade. That makes the presence of London Court, a walk-through shopping arcade done up in mock Tudor, half-timbered architecture, appear all the more quirky. You enter through iron portcullises as if penetrating a medieval castle. Now that the Cup is gone, Perth's true pride and joy can resume its given place. Kings Park sprawls over close to 1,000 acres of more or less natural bushland high on Mount Eliza. Perth's port of Fremantle, once a sleepy bohemian enclave of graceful Victorian buildings, has been spruced up since the Cup. The view from the Port Authority building gives you an idea of exactly how much the town has grown and how endless the beaches beyond appear. Tuna fleets still come into Fishing Boat Harbor, their lattice rigs looking clumsy next to the sleek yachts. In the Fremantle Museum and the Maritime Museum are relics from earlier seafaring days, spars from a 17th century Dutch wreck, and harpoons of whalers who set forth from Fremantle in the last century. As if Perth itself weren't relaxing enough, stressed-out locals flee to Rottnest Island, 12 miles off the coast. No cars are allowed, all the better to search out hidden coves, ride bicycles, and feed the placid quokkas in peace. If there were one state that Australians regard as their Florida and Hawaii, it would have to be Queensland. Brisbane, the capital, has been compared to a miniature Los Angeles and is the gateway to the Sunshine Coast. Way up in the deep north lies Cairns, with some of the best game fishing grounds in the world at its feet. In between Brisbane and Cairns sits Townsville, another tropical haven that serves as the major jumping-off point to the Whitsunday Islands. From all three cities, in fact, it's just a short hop over to Queensland's main claim to fame. Along the northeast coast of Australia is what has been called the world's largest living thing, the Great Barrier Reef. It's actually not one single living thing. It's a chain of islands and reefs that meander along the coastline for about 1,250 miles. Picture the reef as a necklace, a very, very long necklace that pops up from the shimmering blue-green sea as anything from tiny sand spits to mountainous jungles, anywhere from 10 to 200 miles offshore. The water is rarely more than 100 feet deep along the entire shelf. The islands themselves range from uninhabited wildlife sanctuaries to Tony resorts where die-hard hedonists go from spa to tennis to disco. At low tide, you can walk very carefully on the reef itself, studying the marine life and how the reef was sculpted. Minute coral polyps banded together and secreted limestone, which hardened into the rocky crust you see. The best way to get a sense of this, of course, is to dive right in. You plunge into a realm apart, held in a suspended state of wonder. Off the northern reef run black marlin, and sports fishermen haul in half-ton trophy fish every year during the tournament season. But the fish and the reef are strictly protected. The simplest rule to observe is not to touch anything, and if you do, put it back. Also remember to wear sneakers while reef walking, since the rubber soles won't harm the coral, and take care to treat any stings or cuts right away. At a resort like Hamilton Island, about as posh as it gets, you might be whisked over to the reef by helicopter to stay overnight in a plush cruise vessel. You see, most of the resorts are not on the actual reef, but on nearby islands, and like Hamilton, make arrangements to take you over by air, or on boats like the 2001 Trimaran. Hamilton, one of the Whitsunday chain of islands, is the only one to have an airport that can accommodate jets. Once there, just about every known diversion on water and sand is available. You can exhilarate and exhaust yourself on water skis and windsurfers, chartering a bareboat yacht or deep-sea fishing boat, scuba and snorkel diving, golf, tennis, both beach and hard court, even take to the air trying your wings parasailing. Or you can bronze by the pool, gathering energy for some serious beachcombing or shopping. Koalas, kangaroos, and emus go about their business inside the island's own wildlife preserve, Fauna Park. Here's another chance to study these footnotes of evolution on their own turf. In typical Aussie fashion, they take all this admiration in their stride, not letting it go to their head. By night, the restaurants, bars, discos, and nightclubs thump along as if it were downtown Sydney. Other islands along the chain, from mountainous Hayman to the low-lying coral cay of Green and the overgrown jungle of Dunk Island, each lays claim to one specialty or another. Naturally enough, there's no better place in the world for lone rangers of the surf, those types who never seem to take off their masks. And whether you're one of those who like to blast a four-wheeler over bushland or ride horses into a dense canopy of rainforest, these islands are bound to draw you in. It would take a good month to get a taste of the major Australian cities and the Great Barrier Reef. Even then, you'd only scratch the surface of what the country has to offer. Ayers Rock, a shrine sacred to the Aborigines, is one of the geological wonders of the world. It lurches abruptly 1,260 feet out of the flatlands. So massive is this plateau that the entire city of London proper could fit on top. Then there's the vast Northern Territory, ranging from rugged, bone-dry outback to a jagged coast swept by monsoons. Some would say that the Northern Territory is the last resort of the legendary Australian Bushmen. Others would direct you to northern Queensland and Cape York, where the vehicle of choice is four-wheel drive, just about the only vehicle that can negotiate these remote tracks. The island state of Tasmania, on the other hand, is as green as Ireland, and you can drive through beaches to highland to jungle within a day.
Well, that's our tour of this magnificent land down under. It's a wonderful place for a vacation, and I'm sure you'll find the area that's just right for you. Now keep watching, because I have some information for you that'll make your trip easier and much more fun.
They don't call it the land down under for nothing. Australia may be a long way to go, but it's all well worth the time. Continental Airlines, United, and the Australian national carrier Qantas leave from Los Angeles and San Francisco, and the actual flying time is around 14.5 hours. Some flights lay over in Hawaii. Try to get a seat on the right side of the plane if you can, so that your indelible first impression will be one of dawn breaking over the continent. Once there, you'll find the country almost as easy to get around as the United States, and almost as big if you leave out Alaska. The quickest way to hop from city to city, of course, is to fly. Going from Sydney to Melbourne takes an hour and a half, another hour on to Adelaide, another 3 to Perth. That makes a Sydney to Perth flight all the way across the continent 5 hours long. By U.S. standards, internal flights are expensive, but you can save up to 40% by buying air passes in advance. Ansett Airlines is the major carrier to nearly all destinations, but there are also Australian Airlines and East West. If you have more time, traveling by train is a great way to soak up the vastness of the landscape. If you plan on traveling much by train, you might look into buying an Austrail pass before you go. The best way to make your way around the cities is by car, or perhaps a mix of using your own car and local buses and trams, since this way often frees your attention to see more. Adelaide and Perth operate free buses on designated tourist routes, and Melbourne's tram system is a treat unto itself, up there with hanging off the Powell Street streetcars in San Francisco. Budget is the largest rental car agency in the country, but there's Hertz and Avis as well. All have offices in the major cities and airports. All you'll need is a valid U.S. driver's license and a credit card. They do drive on the left over here, but don't worry. It's far easier than you think to get the hang of it. Just take things slowly, particularly those right-hand turns. City streets are comparable to those in the U.S. Out in the countryside, however, expect some bumps. Generally, dress here is light and informal. Australians are not typically contrary souls, but their seasons they can do nothing about. They're backwards. But even in their winter, in the chilly depths of July, it rarely dips below the mid-40s. November to March, the temperatures range from the mid-50s to scorching 80s in a place like Perth. These are also the driest months in the driest continent on Earth. Except for the Great Barrier Reef, when the skies can open up with 18 inches a month in torrential downpours. Melbourne, too, is in a class by itself, and they say the city can run through 4 seasons in a day. Adelaide, on the other hand, stays the consistently driest of the major cities. Before you go, you have to have a current passport and obtain a tourist visa. The visa is free and is issued by the consular offices in New York and Los Angeles. If you drop off your passport in person, you'll have it back with the visa stamped inside within a day or 2. If you mail it in, you should allow a month. Be sure that you have a return ticket and expect to pay a departure tax of $20 Australian on exiting the country. Exchanging currency, by the way, is a very simple matter, and you can trade your U.S. dollars in for Australian dollars at most banks or hotels. In general, expect to pay about the same prices for items here as you do back home. Apart from the upended seasons, there's another important difference here, and that's the electrical current, 240 volts. Although most large hotels also have outlets for 110 volts, the U.S. standard, it's wise to pick up a 3-prong electrical adapter before you go. As you'd expect with the tourist hotspot of the 80s, Australia has more than its share of world-class hotels. In Sydney, the Sydney Regent is the choice if you want to be near the rocks and the harbour, and the Hyatt Kingsgate for exploring King's Cross and Paddington with quick access to downtown. The Regent Melbourne rises 35 floors above the hustle and bustle of Collins Place. Nearby on the Paris end of Collins Street, the Hyatt Collins has blended its own high-rise tower into a landmark Victorian facade. Adelaide Park Royal commands sweeping views over the city's green heart. while the Hyatt Adelaide is one of the most recent additions to the Adelaide skyline. With all the new hotels going up before last year's Cup races, Perth shouldn't suffer a room shortage for years to come. Two of the most stunning additions are the Merlin and the Perth Park Royal. And on the Great Barrier Reef, Hamilton Island Resort can ensconce you in everything from air-conditioned suites to glorified thatched bungalows.
Thanks for joining me on this video trip to the land down under. I'm Tricia Springer. Hope to see you soon in Australia.
There are many other Rand McNally programs to great vacation destinations around the world. For a free brochure, call this toll-free number or ask for Rand McNally video trips at your favorite video store or bookstore. It's the best way to make sure your vacation is exactly the way you want it to be.